The first time I saw him again, I couldn't breathe. 7 years had passed, but the moment I heard his voice, deep, commanding, so painfully familiar, it felt like time folded in on itself. I was standing in the parking lot of a quiet diner just outside of town. I had stopped there on my way back from my son's soccer game. The air smelled like rain and coffee, the kind of ordinary day that turns unforgettable in one heartbeat. He was standing by a black SUV, silver hair perfectly in place, that same air of authority that once made me shrink inside. My ex-father-in-law. "Still alone, huh?" he said, smiling like he already knew the answer. My stomach twisted. The years hadn't softened his arrogance. If anything, it had sharpened it. I managed a small, polite nod, clutching my car keys so tightly they bit into my palm. "I guess some people were never meant to keep a man," he added casually, glancing over my simple clothes, my old sedan. It was just like before. He still knew how to make me feel small without raising his voice. I forced a shaky breath. "It's good to see you too," I said, lying through my teeth. He chuckled, as if my words amused him. "My sons were married now, you probably heard. A lawyer's daughter. Suits him better." I didn't answer. The old ache crawled up my chest. The years I spent trying to prove myself good enough, only to be thrown away like a mistake. But before I could turn and leave, I heard the sound of the back car door opening. My little boy's voice broke through the tension. "Mom, can I grab my jacket?" And just like that, the world froze. He stepped out of the car, his small face flushed from the heat, his messy brown hair catching the sunlight. For a moment, my ex-father-in-law didn't move. His eyes locked on the boy, and the smile vanished from his lips. I saw the exact second recognition struck him. His posture stiffened. His gaze darted between me and my son, his grandson, though he didn't know it yet. That boy had his jawline, his sharp eyes, the same faint dimple that used to appear whenever his grandfather forced a smile. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't planned for any of it. He took a hesitant step forward. "Who is that?" he asked, voice suddenly unsteady. I swallowed hard, gripping my son's shoulder protectively. "Just my son," I said softly. Something flickered in his eyes. Shock, disbelief, fear. He tried to compose himself, but his voice cracked when he spoke again. "Your son?" I didn't answer. I just opened the car door and said quietly, "We should go." As I started the engine, I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring at my boy like he'd seen a ghost. I drove off before he could ask another question. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. He didn't know. Not yet. But the way he looked at my son told me one thing. He suspected something. And that was the beginning of everything I thought I'd buried 7 years ago. 7 years. That's how long it's been since I packed my life into 2 suitcases and walked out of that mansion for the last time. People say time heals everything, but that's a lie. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to live with the scar. I was 28 when I left, too young to understand how power and pride could crush a marriage, too naive to think love alone could protect me. My ex-husband and I weren't unhappy in the beginning. He was kind, gentle even, until his father started meddling. That man never believed I was worthy of their name. I didn't come from money, didn't have the proper background. I was just a girl who worked my way through college, waiting tables and dreaming of something better. But dreams don't mean much when you marry into a family that measures worth in status and bloodlines. The pressure came slowly at first, subtle comments, quiet disapproval. Then it became open hostility. Every dinner turned into an interrogation. Every mistake became proof that I didn't belong. And when I got pregnant, that was the end. He accused me of trapping his son, of ruining his future. I still remember that night, the storm raging outside, his words cutting through me like glass. My husband didn't defend me. He just stood there, silent, as his father demanded I do the right thing and leave. I did. But I didn't tell them everything. When I left, I was already 2 months pregnant. I hid it because I knew they'd take him away from me. To them, he'd be an heir, a possession. To me, he was the only piece of love I had left. So I moved to the suburbs, found a small house near the edge of town, and built a quiet life from the ground up. I worked as a teacher's aide during the day and took online classes at night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. My son, my light, grew up surrounded by laughter and books instead of luxury and coldness. Sometimes late at night, I'd see a photo online of my ex-husband at some charity gala, always smiling, always perfect beside his new wife. I'd scroll past quickly, telling myself I didn't care, but deep down I did. Not because I missed him, but because of the injustice. They took everything from me, my name, my dignity, my family, and walked away clean. Until now. Seeing his father again today, it cracked something open inside me. The look on his face when he saw my son, it wasn't just surprise. It was recognition. And if he truly suspects who that boy is, I know what comes next. That family doesn't back down from anything they want. I thought I'd buried that part of my life forever. But maybe the past isn't done with me yet. The diner wasn't far from the private school where I worked. After that awkward encounter, I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, that he'd drive away, forget my face, and go back to his perfect world. But life doesn't work that kindly. 2 days later, the principal called me into her office. She smiled nervously as she handed me a thick envelope. "You've been requested for a tutoring program off campus. A private client. The district approved it." I frowned. "Requested? By name?" She nodded. "Yes, they said they'd heard great things about you." When I opened the envelope, my heart dropped. The address belonged to the Harrington Foundation, the very organization my ex-father-in-law ran. It couldn't be a coincidence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after my son went to bed, staring at the address written in neat blue ink. My hands trembled as I read it over and over. He had found me, or at least he wanted to. I could have refused. I should have. But something deep inside whispered that running again would only make it worse. I needed to know what he wanted. So I said yes. The following Monday, I drove up to the foundation building. Sleek glass walls, immaculate gardens, everything I remembered about their world of money and perfection. It felt like stepping back into a nightmare I thought I'd escaped. Inside, the receptionist led me to a conference room. My ex-father-in-law was already there, seated at the head of the table, a folder in front of him. He looked up when I entered. That same composed expression, but there was something else now, a flicker of calculation behind his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said smoothly. "I wanted to offer you a position, personal tutoring for a youth program we're developing." I forced a polite smile. "I appreciate the offer, but why me?" He leaned back, studying me carefully. "Because I believe in second chances," he said. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. His gaze lingered a little too long. "Your boy," he said suddenly. "How old is he?" My pulse jumped. 6, I said quietly. "Smart kid, I bet." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "He reminds me of someone I used to know." Every word was a test, every glance a question he wasn't ready to ask aloud. When the meeting ended, he handed me the folder. "Think about it. I'd really like you on the team." Outside, I could barely breathe. The moment I stepped into my car, I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper, a folded photograph. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a picture of me, 7 years ago, standing in the Harrington garden. My ex-husband had his arm around me. We looked happy. On the back, written in elegant handwriting, were 4 chilling words: "Truth always finds you." I didn't need to guess who left it. The past wasn't chasing me anymore. It had already caught up. The next week, I started the new position at the foundation. I told myself I could handle it, that working there didn't mean letting the past back in. I needed the money, and maybe, just maybe, facing him would give me closure. But from the first day I realized I'd made a mistake. He wasn't just my employer. He was watching me. Every time I entered a room, his eyes followed. Every conversation seemed harmless on the surface, but beneath it was something sharper. A quiet test, a trap waiting to spring. He started small. Casual questions about my life, my son, where I'd lived all these years. I kept my answers vague, careful, polite. Then one morning, he showed up at my desk with a smile that didn't match his eyes. "You know, we have a family day coming up," he said. "Employees can bring their children. It would be wonderful if your boy came too." I froze. "I don't think that's nonsense," he interrupted smoothly. "It's a great opportunity for the kids, and I'd love to meet him properly." There was no way to refuse without raising suspicion, so I nodded, pretending to smile, but my stomach churned all day. When I got home, I watched my son sleep. his small chest rising and falling, completely unaware of the storm building around us. I promised myself I wouldn't let them take him from me. Not again. The event came faster than I expected. The foundation's garden was filled with balloons, music, and children's laughter. I tried to relax, but my ex-father-in-law was everywhere, hovering nearby, pretending to mingle. He approached us with a friendly smile. "You must be her son," he said, kneeling slightly. "What's your name?" My boy answered shyly, and his voice, it was the same tone, the same rhythm I used to hear in my husband. The resemblance was undeniable. The older man's eyes softened for a brief second. "You have his eyes," he murmured, almost to himself. Then he stood, his expression unreadable. That night, I received an email from HR. My contract had been updated, without my consent. It included new clauses about public representation and family participation. My son's name had been added as part of a community outreach program. He'd done it deliberately. He was trying to pull my child into his world legally. I confronted him the next morning. "You had no right to include my son in anything," I said, voice trembling. He smiled calmly. "You're misunderstanding, dear. I just think a child like him deserves better opportunities. We have resources, schools, a future, things you can't provide." I felt my blood run cold. "He's my son." His eyes darkened. "You keep saying that as if it makes it true." The words hit me like a slap. That was it. His mask slipping for the first time. When I left the office that day, I saw him standing at the window, watching as I guided my son into the car. His expression wasn't curiosity anymore. It was possession. And I finally understood. He didn't just suspect the truth. He was planning to prove it. It happened on a Saturday. The foundation was hosting its annual charity gala, an event full of polished smiles, champagne, and hypocrisy. Employees were encouraged to attend, and declining wasn't an option. I told myself I'd go, stay quiet, and leave early. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The air around me had that same heavy stillness I remembered from the night my life first fell apart. I wore a simple black dress, nothing fancy, and brought my son along because the invitation specifically said family welcome. He was excited. He'd never been to a place so grand. I tried to smile for him, but my hands shook as I parked the car. Inside, the ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers. I could feel eyes on me the moment I walked in, whispering, curious glances. My ex-father-in-law stood near the stage, talking to reporters, completely at ease. He approached with his signature smile. "I'm so glad you came," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder as if we were old friends. "Tonight's going to be unforgettable." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. During dinner, he gave a speech, smooth, rehearsed, full of praise for his foundation's commitment to families and the future. I tried to tune him out until I heard him say my name. "And tonight," he announced, "I'd like to recognize one of our newest members, someone who embodies the strength of motherhood." My heart stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. I forced a smile and stood, my knees trembling. He gestured toward me warmly. "She's a remarkable woman. Raised a fine young boy all on her own." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "A boy who, I must say, bears an uncanny resemblance to someone very dear to me." The room murmured. Laughter, gasps, cameras flashing. I felt heat rush to my face. My son clutched my hand, confused and frightened. I tried to speak, but my voice caught. "That's enough," I whispered. He ignored me, his tone turning solemn. "You see, family is about truth, about legacy, and sometimes the truth finds its way home whether we're ready or not." He looked directly at me. "Isn't that right?" It was a trap, and I had walked right into it. Reporters surged forward asking questions. "Is he related to the Harringtons? Were you married to their son? Is this your grandson, Mr. Harrington?" I pulled my boy close and pushed through the crowd, blinking back tears. Every flash of a camera felt like another blow. Outside, I heard him call after me. "You should have told me the truth sooner," he said calmly. "Now the world will demand answers." I turned to face him, shaking. "You had no right," he smiled, cold, triumphant. "I have every right. He's blood." For a moment, I saw the man he truly was, cruel, entitled, certain the world belonged to him. As I drove home that night, my son asked softly, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I couldn't answer. I just said, "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong." But inside, I knew everything had changed. He'd taken my peace, my privacy, and the quiet life I built, and shattered it in front of everyone. And the worst part was, I still didn't know what he'd do next. The days after the gala felt like a blur, loud, chaotic, and cruel. By Monday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, reporters, online bloggers digging through my past. Someone had leaked old photos of me with my ex-husband, turning whispers into proof. By noon, my name was trending. The headlines were merciless. Harrington heir's hidden family, single mother claims secret child with the Harringtons. I didn't claim anything. I hadn't said a word. But silence, apparently, was confession. When I arrived at work, the atmosphere was suffocating. People stopped talking when I walked by. My supervisor pulled me into her office, her tone awkward but firm. "The board has decided to place you on leave," she said, "until things settle down." I stared at her. "I didn't do anything wrong." She sighed. "You know how it looks, sweetheart. The foundation can't risk bad publicity." Bad publicity. That's what my life had become, a PR problem. I packed my things in silence. My coworkers avoided my eyes. By the time I reached the parking lot, tears were spilling down my cheeks. I wasn't crying from shame anymore. I was crying from exhaustion. At home, I turned off my phone, drew the curtains, and held my son close. He didn't understand why people suddenly pointed cameras at us when we went out. "Mom," he whispered one night, "why are they saying I did something bad?" My throat tightened. "You didn't, baby. You're perfect. They're just confused." But deep down, I knew confusion wasn't the problem. It was power. Mr. Harrington had it. I didn't. Within a week, rumors spread that he was considering a paternity petition, a legal motion that could force a DNA test. I didn't even know if that was true, but it didn't matter. The fear alone was enough to keep me up every night. Bills started piling up. My savings drained faster than I expected. I sold my wedding ring, the last remnant of the life I'd once had, just to buy groceries. Every knock on the door made my heart jump. Every shadow outside the window looked like a threat. Then, one evening, someone actually came. It wasn't the media this time. It was a woman, mid-30s, confident, holding a file folder. She introduced herself softly. "I'm Claire. I used to work for the Harringtons. I know what they did to you." I didn't know whether to trust her, but something in her eyes, anger mixed with regret, made me listen. "They're preparing to go public," she said. "They want to use the boy to restore the family image, make it look like reconciliation, a redemption story." My blood ran cold. "They can't. He's my son." She nodded. "Then you'd better get ready to prove it." She slid the folder toward me. Inside are records, dates, payments, signatures, things that don't match their version of the story. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were copies of medical bills and letters, proof that they knew I was pregnant before I left, proof that they'd tried to make me sign a non-disclosure agreement. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt rage. Maybe I couldn't undo the past, but I could finally expose it. I didn't sleep that night. The folder sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. Every time I looked at it, my pulse quickened. I knew opening it would change everything. Again. When dawn came, I made coffee, took a deep breath, and began. Inside were receipts, letters, and scanned legal documents. The first few pages were medical bills, dates matching my early pregnancy. My name was on them, but something else caught my eye. The payer. It wasn't me. It was the Harrington Foundation. My stomach twisted. Why would they pay for my prenatal appointments after forcing me to leave? Then I found a letter, dated 2 months before the divorce was finalized. It was from their family attorney to my ex-husband's father. The confidentiality agreement will ensure she cannot claim the child as legitimate. Payment schedule confirmed. Recommend relocation assistance to avoid public speculation. I covered my mouth, trembling. They hadn't just forced me out. They had planned it, legally and financially, like a transaction. But the next document stopped my breath entirely. It was a paternity report, dated 6 weeks after I'd left. My husband had taken a DNA test, and the result wasn't a match. Except the test wasn't from a verified lab. It was handwritten, unsigned, and attached to a memo marked for record use only. They'd faked it. My ex-husband had gone along with it. That was how they justified disowning me, by creating proof that the baby couldn't be his. All those years I'd told myself he was weak, but not cruel. I'd believed maybe he loved me once. But reading that document, I realized he'd betrayed me too, just quieter, cowardly. I pushed the papers away and buried my face in my hands. For a moment, grief swallowed me whole. Then I looked toward the hallway, where my son's drawings covered the wall. His world was innocent. Pure. He deserved better than the lies they built. I called Claire. "How did you get these?" "I kept backups," she said. "Your ex-father-in-law ordered them destroyed after the divorce. He said no paper trail, but I couldn't stomach it. I knew one day he'd go too far." She hesitated. "There's more you should see. Come tonight. There's something in the Foundation's archives. Something even he doesn't know exists." I hesitated. "Why help me?" "Because," she said quietly, "I lost someone too. The Harringtons destroyed my sister's career when she spoke up. You're not the first woman they've buried, but you could be the last." That night, I left my son with a neighbor and drove to the Foundation's storage facility. My hands shook as Claire unlocked the side door with a stolen keycard. Inside, she led me to a dusty filing cabinet. "Box 12, she whispered. I pulled out a folder labeled Project Legacy. Inside were photos, me, pregnant, entering a clinic. Private investigator notes. Financial records showing the Foundation paying for medical confidentiality. But the last page made my knees buckle. It was an internal memo, signed by Mr. Harrington himself. Confirm potential lineage through secondary sample. Subject's child to be considered for succession. Pending verification. Succession. He hadn't wanted to destroy me. He'd wanted to claim my son. For the first time in years, I felt like I had power again. Real, tangible power. The truth was in my hands, and for a brief moment, I believed it would save me. Claire and I planned to meet the next morning to organize everything. She said she knew a journalist who'd been trying to expose the Harringtons for years. "Once the story's out, they can't silence you anymore," she promised. But when morning came, Claire didn't show up. I called. No answer. I texted. Nothing. By noon, I drove to her apartment. The door was unlocked, lights off. Inside, everything was overturned, papers scattered, drawers pulled open. The place looked ransacked. Her phone was on the counter, buzzing endlessly. I picked it up. The last text she'd sent was to me. "They know." A chill went through me. Before I could process, my phone rang. Unknown number. A man's voice, calm, controlled. "Miss Bennett," he said, "you have something that belongs to Mr. Harrington." My pulse spiked. "Who is this?" "Just a friend. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. Bring the folder to the Foundation this afternoon, and no one gets hurt." I hung up immediately, grabbed the documents and stuffed them into a backpack. Then I went straight to pick up my son from school. He ran toward me smiling, but I couldn't even return it. I just held his hand tighter than usual. By the time we got home, 2 black cars were parked across the street. I pretended not to notice, told my boy to go pack some clothes for a little trip. When I went back to the kitchen, the backpack was gone. I froze. The back door was ajar, lock broken. Someone had been inside. All that evidence, the only thing connecting their crimes, it was gone. I called 911, but before I could explain, there was a knock at the front door. 2 uniformed officers stood there. One held a clipboard. "Ma'am, we received a report of potential child neglect at this address." "What?" I whispered, stunned. They stepped inside, scanning the room. "We just need to make sure everything's safe for the child." I felt my knees weaken. It was him. He'd done this. He'd turned the system against me again, just like before. When they finally left, warning me that a caseworker would follow up, I collapsed to the floor. My whole body shook. That night, I sat in the dark, clutching my son while he slept beside me. My house no longer felt like home, it felt like a trap. Claire was gone. The evidence was gone. My reputation was ruined. And now, they were coming for my son. I wanted to give up. I really did. But then I remembered the line on that memo. Subject's child to be considered for succession. He wouldn't stop until he owned my boy. And for the first time, the fear inside me turned into something else. Something sharper. I looked at my reflection in the window, my face streaked with tears and fury. "They think they've silenced me," I whispered. "They're wrong. Because I still had one thing they didn't. The truth wasn't just in those papers. It was in my blood, in my son's face, in every cruel thing they'd ever done to me. And I was done running." 3 weeks passed since everything fell apart. In those 21 days, I'd cried enough tears to drown in. But pain can only break you for so long, then it starts to rebuild you. I moved out of the house. It didn't feel safe anymore. A friend from school, the only one who hadn't turned away, let me and my son stay in her spare room. It was small, but it was clean, quiet, and ours. Every morning I woke up early, made breakfast for my boy, and then sat by the window with my laptop. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. I started by tracing every name and email I remembered from my time at the foundation. Old contacts, donors, even interns, someone had to know something. It took days of silence before one person finally replied, a young journalist named Maya Ruiz. She'd covered the Harringtons before, their shady donations, hidden political ties. I believe you, she said over the phone. But I need proof. Documents, witnesses, something solid. I swallowed. They stole everything. Then we find more, she said, and we do it the right way. Her confidence lit something inside me. Together we started digging. Claire's disappearance wasn't on any police report, but Maya found something odd. 3 days after she vanished, a resignation letter from her appeared in the foundation's system, digitally signed. Forgery, Maya muttered. Classic damage control. Meanwhile, I cleaned up my online presence, changed numbers, and met with a lawyer through a women's legal network. She told me that if the Harringtons tried to claim custody, I could counter with evidence of harassment, if I had witnesses. So I reached out to people I thought had forgotten me, old neighbors, former staff from the mansion. Some ignored me, but one didn't. Mrs. Green, the housekeeper who'd comforted me the night I left years ago. She sent me a message. I remember what they did. I never forgot. Come see me. When I visited her, her hands trembled as she handed me an old flash drive. He thought he'd destroyed every copy, she said, but I kept this. Inside were security recordings, footage from the night of my departure. It showed my ex-father-in-law yelling, threatening to erase me from the family name. It proved coercion. It proved intent. I cried, not from sadness but relief. For the first time, I saw the woman in the mirror not as a victim, but as a mother on a mission. I cut my hair, dressed sharper, stood taller. Maya helped me organize everything, the video, the documents, the timeline. She promised to release the story once we filed the legal complaint. They'll try to silence us, she warned. Let them try, I said. I'm done hiding. That night I tucked my son into bed. He looked up at me sleepily and asked, Mom, are we going to be okay? I kissed his forehead. We're not just going to be okay, I whispered. We're going to be free. I stayed up until dawn, printing every file, saving every recording, sending copies to cloud drives and trusted hands. Tomorrow I would walk into the same world that once chewed me up, but this time, I wouldn't walk in broken. This time, I'd walk in ready to burn the lies to the ground. The courthouse smelled like old paper and fear. The kind of fear that comes when the truth finally runs out of places to hide. It was the day I'd waited 7 years for. Maya sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, a stack of files neatly arranged between us. My lawyer whispered final instructions, her voice steady and sure. Across the room sat Mr. Harrington, immaculate in his gray suit, jaw tight, eyes cold. He still looked powerful. But this time he didn't look untouchable. The judge entered, the murmuring stopped. The hearing wasn't just about custody now. It was about defamation, coercion, falsified records. Everything we'd uncovered was on the record. When my name was called, I stood. My hands didn't shake this time. I told them everything, how they'd forced me out, how they'd faked the DNA report, how they'd tried to claim my son for their legacy. Every word felt like ripping open an old wound. But I didn't stop. Then Maya cued the footage from Mrs. Green's flash drive. The room went silent as the video played. There he was, my ex-father-in-law threatening me, shouting that I'd regret crossing the Harrington name. His voice filled the courtroom, undeniable and damning. The judge's expression hardened. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the opposing attorney looked uneasy. When it ended, I turned toward him. You said the truth always finds you, I whispered. You were right. He didn't answer. He just stared, as if realizing for the first time that I wasn't the scared girl he'd once crushed. My ex-husband took the stand next. His testimony was half-hearted, full of excuses. I didn't know what my father was doing, he said. You thought it was easier to stay quiet, I cut in. My voice didn't waver. You let them destroy me because silence was convenient. He looked away. By the end of the hearing, the judge ordered an investigation into the falsified documents and granted me full custody, permanently sealed. A week later, the media exploded with headlines, Harrington Empire under investigation. Whistleblower mother exposes elite family scandal. Mr. Harrington resigned from his position. The foundation froze its accounts. The empire he built on control and silence began to crumble. Piece by piece, truth by truth. Maya's article went viral. People called me brave. But I didn't feel brave. I just felt free. One evening, weeks later, I stood outside my new apartment as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. My son rode his bike down the quiet street, laughing, his hair catching the light. For years I'd been running from shadows. Now I was standing in the open, unafraid. He called out, "Mom, watch me," and I did. Every turn of his wheels, every burst of laughter, it was everything I'd fought for. When he stopped beside me, breathless and grinning, he said, "You're smiling again." I knelt down and hugged him tight. "That's because we're safe now." He looked up at me, curious. "Are they gone?" I thought for a moment. "Maybe not gone," I said softly, "but they don't get to decide our story anymore." That night, after he fell asleep, I opened my laptop to an email from Maya. The subject line read, "They wanted to bury you. You built a garden instead." I smiled, because she was right. The woman I used to be had died 7 years ago. The one who remained had learned how to rise. And this time, no one would ever silence her again. It's been 3 years since the trial. The world has moved on, but I haven't forgotten. Not the pain, not the fight, not the woman I became because of it. I live in the same town, in a small brick house surrounded by wildflowers. My son rides his bike to school now, taller, braver, unafraid of cameras or whispers. Every morning, he leaves with a grin that reminds me why I fought so hard to stay standing. I teach again. Creative writing this time. When I look at my students, especially the girls who hide their voices out of fear, I tell them what no one told me. Your truth is your power. Never hand it to anyone else. Sometimes I see my reflection in the classroom window, not the scared young woman who once begged to be believed, but someone sharper, grounded, unbreakable. The Harringtons still exist somewhere in the headlines, fighting lawsuits, denying everything, clinging to their empire. But I don't need their apology anymore. They lost something I'll always have: peace. Last week, Maya published her book. She sent me the first copy with a note. "You didn't just expose them, you rewrote the story." And maybe that's what survival really is. Not escaping the fire, but walking through it and realizing it couldn't burn you anymore. As the sun sets, I watch my son playing in the yard, laughter echoing through the evening air. For the first time, I don't feel haunted. I feel whole, because they tried to erase me, and instead, they made me unforgettable.